black mail-order bride rejected for her color. Until a giant cowboy saw her as his perfect, the train screeches to a halt, steam hissing into the cold mountain air. A bride steps down, clutching her letter of promise, only to be spat on and rejected before the whole town mocked for the color of her skin. The church bell tolls, the crowd jeers, and her dream shatters in the dust. But then boots thunder against the platform. A towering cowboy pushes through, lifting her bag with ease. In front of every sneer and whisper, he claims her as his own, gasps echo. A scandal is born. Yet behind the whispers lies more than prejudice. A banker with forged papers, a hidden past that could ruin them both, and a town ready to drive her out to crown her with respect. As lies tighten like a noose and faith is tested in fire, can love strong enough to defy an entire town survive? The cruelest betrayal. Your reactions remind me why these stories matter. If you still believe in the quiet power of love, justice, and truth, then you're part of the reason I keep sharing them. The January wind whipped across the train platform, carrying snowflakes that sparkled like diamond dust in the crisp Colorado morning of 1870. Children's laughter rang out as they chased each other through the drifts, packing snow into missiles that flew back and forth near the iron tracks. The air smelled of coal, smoke, and pine, winter sharp and clean. Beef prices ain't what they used to be, grumbled old Mr. Henderson, stamping his boots against the wooden planks of the depot. Several other ranchers nodded in agreement, their breath forming clouds in the frosty air as they waited for the Denver train. The distant whistle echoed off the mountainsides, growing louder as black smoke appeared above the tree line. Steel wheels squealed against the rails as the locomotive pulled into the station, steam billowing around its iron flanks. Amanda's heart fluttered as she gathered her simple cotton skirts and stepped carefully down from the passenger car. Her carpet bag felt heavy in one hand, while in the other she clutched a wrinkled letter read and reread so many times the creases had gone soft. The paper contained promises of a new life, of a good man seeking a wife who shared his Christian values and teaching experience. She drew in a steadying breath, scanning the crowd gathered on the platform. After corresponding for 6 months, she would finally meet her intended. According to his letters, Joshua Parker ran a prosperous cattle operation and needed a mother figure for his young daughter. Amanda had prayed long and hard before accepting his proposal, seeing it as God's way of leading her to both a fresh start and a chance to help a motherless child. Their tall man in a brown wool coat stood apart from the others, his bearing matching the description in the letters. Amanda lifted her chin and walked toward him with measured steps, though her pulse raced. "Mr. Parker?" she asked softly. "I'm Amanda Wilson." The rancher's weather-worn face darkened as his gaze traveled over her features, lingering on her light brown skin. His jaw clenched. "What kind of game are you playing?" he demanded, voice rising sharp enough to draw stares. Amanda's breath caught. "Sir, I'm the teacher from New Orleans who's been corresponding with you these past months." She held out his letter with trembling fingers. "You wrote that you were seeking a Christian wife with experience teaching children. I've been deceived." Parker's shout cut through the general murmur of the crowd. Several people turned to watch the scene unfolding. "You never said nothing about being colored in them letters. This here's no better than a trick." The words struck Amanda like physical blows. She stumbled back a step, letter falling from numb fingers into the snow. The platform seemed to tilt beneath her feet as faces turned toward her, some showing pity, others wearing cruel smirks of satisfaction at her public humiliation. "I never meant to deceive anyone," she whispered, but Parker had already turned his back, stalking a way through the parting crowd. A few women clucked their tongues, while others hustled their children past as if her presence might somehow taint them. The train's whistle pierced the air again as it prepared to continue its journey. Amanda watched helplessly as it pulled away. From the station, dark smoke lingering in the cold air like judgment upon her hopes. She sank down onto her trunk, legs no longer able to hold her up. The afternoon light faded into purple evening shadows. One by one, the townspeople drifted away, leaving her alone on the platform. Snow continued to fall softly, dusting her shoulders and carpetbag. Her careful plans, her prayers for a new beginning, all scattered like ashes in the winter wind. Amanda wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold in what warmth remained. The cold seeped through her worn coat, but the chill in her heart cut deeper. She had believed God was leading her to a new home, a place to belong. Instead, she found herself stranded in a strange town as night approached, with no prospects and precious little money. Watching the last streaks of sunset paint the snow-covered peaks, Amanda struggled against waves of despair. She had faced rejection before, when the mob destroyed her school in New Orleans. But she had allowed herself to hope this time would be different, that sharing. Months of letters about faith and family would matter more than the color of her skin. The depot's oil lamps flickered to life, casting yellow pools on the gathering darkness. A few snowflakes caught the light like falling stars before melting on the wooden planks. Amanda bowed her head, lips moving in silent prayer for guidance. She had come too far to give up now, but the path ahead seemed as dark as the shadows, stretching across the empty platform. The crunch of boots on snow made her look up. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw several figures approaching through the gloom. Her hands tightened on her carpetbag, uncertainty warring with the desperate need to believe that someone might show kindness to a stranger in need. Through tear-blurred vision, Amanda saw several figures approaching in the gathering dusk. Fingers tightened around her carpetbag as whispers and mutters drifted across the platform. The depot's oil lamps cast long shadows, making the onlookers seem larger, more threatening. Then the crowd parted like water around a stone as Dale Barringer stepped forward, even among the well-built ranchers of the territory. He stood out tall as a pine tree, shoulders broad from years of working his land. But it was the quiet dignity in his bearing that drew all eyes. Amanda had heard whispers about the widowed rancher during her brief time on the platform. Some called him a gentle giant. Others said grief had stolen his smile years ago when his wife passed. Now those steady eyes met hers with something that made her heart skip not pity, but understanding. Before she could rise from her trunk, Dale strode forward and lifted her heavy carpetbag as if it weighed no more than a feather. His voice, when it came, carried across the platform like summer thunder. "If he's too blind to see God's gift, then I'll claim her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several women clutched at their shawls, while the men shifted uneasily. Joshua Parker, who had been lingering at the edge of the gathering, stepped forward, with a sneer twisting his features. "You've gone soft in the head, Barringer," he spat. "Or maybe just desperate enough to take what no decent man would want." Dale didn't even glance his way. Instead, he kept his gaze locked on Amanda's face, offering his hand with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his imposing size. Ma'am, pride prickled at Amanda's spine. She had not come all this way to accept charity, even kind-hearted charity. "I don't need," she began, but a gust of wind cut off her words, bringing with it a swirl of heavy snowflakes. Dale remained patient, hand extended. Storms coming in hard. "Let me at least buy you a hot meal while you consider your options." The snow was falling faster now, thick flakes catching in Amanda's eyelashes. She looked at Dale's offered hand strong, calloused from honest work, yet held out with such care. Something in her chest loosened, a knot of fear beginning to unwind. Perhaps accepting help wasn't the same as admitting defeat. She placed her gloved hand in his. "Thank you, Mr. Barringer." His fingers closed warm around hers as he helped her to her feet. Without fanfare, he guided her through the muttering crowd toward Miller's Calf across the street. Amanda held her head high, though she felt the weight of every stare. The cafe's bell jingled as they entered, bringing blessed warmth and the smell of coffee and fresh bread. Conversations died as heads turned their way. Dale led her to a corner table, pulling out a chair with old-fashioned courtesy. "Evening, Mrs. Miller," he called to the stout woman behind the counter. "To suppers, if you please." The woman hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Coming right up, Mr. Barringer." They sat in awkward silence until steaming bowls of stew appeared before them, accompanied by thick slices of bread. Amanda's stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since early morning, but she forced herself to take small, careful bites. "I came from New Orleans," she said softly, after several spoonfuls. "I was teaching at a school for freed children there," till she trailed off, the memory of smoke and shouting still too raw. Dale nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I reckon everyone deserves a fresh start." He broke off a piece of bread, considering it before adding, "My ranch has been mighty quiet these past 3 years. Sarah, my wife, she loved filling it with song and laughter. Now it's just me and the hands, and they bed down in the bunkhouse." Amanda caught the flash of old pain in his expression before he masked it. A man carrying his own wounds, yet still willing to reach out to help another. She was about to respond when movement caught her eye through the cafe window. The town banker, Mr. Whitaker, stood across the street, watching them with narrow eyes. Even through the growing darkness and swirling snow, his disapproval was clear. As she watched, he bent to speak with Joshua Parker, both men gesturing in their direction. Dale must have noticed her attention shift. "Don't worry about them," he said quietly. "Whitaker's been trying to foreclose on half the ranches in the territory. Man feeds on other folks' misfortunes." Amanda turned back to her stew, but her appetite had dimmed. "I don't wish to cause trouble for you, Mr. Barringer." "Dale," he corrected gently. "And trouble has a way of finding honest folk, whether they wish it or not. Question is how we face it." The cafe had grown quieter as the evening deepened, most customers hurrying home ahead of the storm. Through the windows, Amanda could see the snow falling harder, the wind driving it sideways now. She thought of the cold platform of trying to find shelter in a town where most doors would be closed to her. As if reading her thoughts, Dale set down his coffee cup. "My ranch is 5 miles out. It's not much, and the house needs a woman's touch, but there's a warm bed in the spare room." He met her eyes directly. "For tonight, at least, until you decide your next step." Amanda looked at this quiet giant of a man who had stood against the crowd's judgment without hesitation. His face showed nothing but sincere concern, yet she sensed the offering cost him something, perhaps the first breach in walls built around his solitude. Outside, the wind howled against the cafe windows, carrying the sound of Whitaker's and Parker's raised voices. Inside, Dale waited patiently for her answer, his presence as solid and reassuring as the mountains themselves. The wagon's wooden wheels crunched through fresh snow as Dale guided his team away from Miller's Calf. Amanda sat beside him on the rough bench, her carpet bag clutched close, watching as the town's lights grew dim behind them. The late afternoon sky hung heavy with clouds, promising more snow before nightfall. Wind whistled across the open range, finding every gap in Amanda's woolen coat. She pulled it tighter, grateful at least for the thick buffalo robe Dale had draped across their laps. Beside her, the big rancher sat straight and steady, his presence blocking the worst of the wind. The horses plodded forward, their breaths creating white puffs in the cold air. Amanda studied the landscape, endless white, rolling away toward distant mountains. Somewhere in that vastness lay Dale's ranch, and with it, an uncertain future she hadn't imagined when stepping off the train just hours ago. "May I ask you something, Mr. Barringer?" she ventured, after they'd traveled a mile in companionable silence. "Dale," he reminded her softly, "and yes, you may." Amanda chose her words carefully. "Why did you speak up?" "Back at the depot, I mean. You don't know me. You had no cause to risk your reputation." Dale's hands tightened slightly on the reins. For several moments, only the creak of leather and jingle of harness filled the air. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but firm. "My Pa taught me that evil wins when good men stay silent." He glanced at her briefly. What happened back there that was pure meanness, done in broad daylight where folks could see? Couldn't stand by and watch it. Amanda nodded, touched by his simple honesty. His silence felt different from the cold shoulders she'd known before, protective. Rather than dismissive, like a warm blanket against winter's chill, the wagon crested a small rise, and Dale pointed with his chin. There she is, home. Through the gathering dusk, Amanda made out a cabin nestled in a protected hollow. Smoke rose straight from its stone chimney, evidence that one of Dale's hands had kept the fire going. A barn stood nearby, its weathered, boards telling of years facing Colorado winters. Dale helped her down from the wagon, then led the team to the barn. Amanda's boots crunched in the snow as she followed, taking in her surroundings. The cabin was larger than she'd expected, built of solid logs with a pitched roof. A lean-to addition stretched along one side, presumably for storage. Inside the cabin, warmth from the wood stove wrapped around them like a blessing. Dale lit a lamp, revealing a single room that served as kitchen, dining room, and living space combined. Simple furnishings spoke of bachelor living: a rough-hewn table, straight-backed chairs, a few hooks for clothes. But everything was clean, if sparse. "It ain't much," Dale said, almost apologetically. "Been meaning to add proper rooms, but—" he trailed off, and Amanda caught the ghost of old grief in his eyes. "It's warm," she said firmly, "and that's what matters right now." She removed her coat, already surveying the kitchen area. "Would you allow me to fix us some supper, as thanks for your kindness?" Dale hesitated. "Provisions are simple. Beans, salt pork, some flour." Amanda was already rolling up her sleeves. Simple food feeds the body just as well as fancy dishes. She opened the flour bin, checking its contents. "Do you have any coffee left?" A ghost of a smile touched Dale's lips. "Always keep coffee stocked. One luxury I won't do without." Working with quiet efficiency, Amanda soon had biscuits in the oven and beans simmering with salt pork. The familiar tasks centered her, gave purpose to hands that had been empty and uncertain at the depot. She caught Dale watching her several times, something like wonder in his expression as she transformed basic ingredients into a proper meal. They ate at the wooden table, lamplight casting warm shadows on the walls. The biscuits had turned out light despite the crude ingredients, and Dale seemed to savor every bite. "Been a long spell since I had home-cooked biscuits," he admitted, reaching for a second one. "You work magic with simple stuff." Amanda felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "Teaching school taught me to make do with what's available. Children learn better with something in their stomachs." After the meal, Amanda insisted on helping with the evening chores. Dale protested at first, but she followed him to the barn. Anyway, determination in every step. "I may wear a dress, Mr. Barringer Dale, but I'm no stranger to honest work." The barn's interior glowed with lantern light as they mucked stalls and fed the horses. Amanda worked steadily, her movements efficient despite her city clothes. Dale found himself watching her more than once, impressed by her quiet competence. Outside, the snow began falling harder, thick flakes swirling in the lantern's beam as they crossed back to the cabin. Dale studied the heavy sky with a practiced eye. The storm's settling in proper now, likely be snowbound for a few days. Amanda paused at the cabin door. suddenly aware of their situation alone together, miles from town. But Dale's next words eased her concern. "I'll bed down in the Leonto," he said, matter-of-factly. "Got it fixed up, warm enough. Cabin's yours, with my word as a gentleman that you'll be safe here." The simple declaration, delivered without flourish, touched Amanda deeply. This man's actions spoke louder than any flowery promises she'd received in her letters from the promised groom who had rejected her. Inside, Dale gathered what he needed for the night, moving with careful respect for her space. Before retiring to the lean-to, he built up the fire and showed her where he kept extra wood. "Call out if you need anything," he said. "I'll hear." Left alone, Amanda sat in one of the straight-backed chairs, watching the lamplight flicker on rough-hewn walls. The day's events washed over Hertha. Hope of morning turned to humiliation. Then this unexpected sanctuary with its quiet guardian. She clasped her hands together, bowing her head in the lamplight's glow. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't understand. Your path, but I trust your leading. Please show me the way forward." And she hesitated, then added softly, "Please bless this good man who opened his door when others turned away." The lamp flame danced, casting her shadow on the wall's solitary figure in a stranger's home, yet somehow less alone than she'd been that morning on the train. Outside, snow continued falling, wrapping the cabin in a blanket of white silence. While in the lean-to, Dale Barringer kept his vigil, a guardian against more than just the winter storm. The morning sun painted diamond sparkles across the snow-covered landscape. Inside the cabin, Amanda woke to find frost patterns decorating the window panes. She'd slept better than expected on Dale's rough bed, exhausted from yesterday's events. The cabin's chill spurred her into action, working quietly. She rekindled the fire from banked coals and swept the plank floor with the worn broom she'd found in the corner. Years of teaching had taught her the value of Ardora tidy space meant a settled mind. The familiar motions brought comfort as she worked. Dale's heavy footsteps on the porch announced his return from the barn. He stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots, then stopped short at the sight of the swept floor and cheerful fire. "Been busy already, I see," he said, hanging his coat by the door. Amanda smiled. "Already mixing corn, meal, and water for breakfast cakes. Idle hands make for restless thoughts, my mama always said." The griddle sizzled as she dropped spoonfuls of batter. Soon, the cabin filled with the homey scent of cooking. Dale sat at the table, watching her efficient movements with obvious appreciation. "You seem right at home in a kitchen," he observed, accepting a plate of golden corn cakes. Amanda paused, memories flickering across her face. Necessity teaches quick lessons. After the school burning, I lived rough a spell. You learn to make do, or you don't survive. Dale's expression darkened at the mention of the school burning, but he didn't press for details. Instead, he finished his breakfast and stood, pulling on his heavy coat. "Need to chop more wood before this cold snap deepens. Would you like to learn? Might come in handy." If he stopped, seemingly embarrassed at implying she might stay. Amanda grabbed her coat. In answer, outside, Dale demonstrated the proper stance, the angle of the axe, how to let the weight do the work. She watched carefully, then took her turn. Her first few swings went wild, barely marking the log. But Amanda set her jaw, adjusted her grip, and tried again. Dale stood back, offering quiet corrections when needed. By the time an hour had passed, she'd split several logs, though blisters were forming on her palms. She ignored the sting, satisfaction warming her more than the exercise. "You're determined, I'll give you that," Dale said, taking back the axe. "But might want to save some skin for tomorrow." A shout from the road interrupted them. Through the trees, a horse approached at an awkward gait. Its rider slumped forward. Tom Dale's voice sharpened with concern. He rushed forward as the horse stumbled to a stop, The boy no more than 15 fell from the saddle. Dale caught him, revealing a bloodied arm and torn jacket. Horse spooked at a shadow, Tom mumbled. Threw me into the fence. Was trying to bring supplies. He swayed. On his feet, stayed now. Amanda commanded, her teacher's voice brooking no argument. Mr. Barringer, please fetch clean water and put it to boil. Dale hesitated only a moment before following her instructions. Amanda helped Tom to a chair, carefully removing his jacket to examine the wounds. The gash needs stitching, she announced, examining a particularly deep cut on his upper arm. Do you have needle and thread? Dale produced his wife's old sewing basket. Amanda selected a fine needle and strong thread, then set them in the boiling water to sterilize. Learned this from an army doctor in New Orleans, she explained. Cleaning. Tom's arm with boiled water that had cooled. He taught all the teachers basic medical care. Children are forever getting hurt, and proper doctors were scarce. Tom watched with wide eyes as she threaded the needle. Will it hurt much, ma'am? Amanda's smile was gentle. Some, but you're brave enough to ride injured through the snow. You can handle a few stitches. Her fingers moved with practiced precision. Neat stitches closing the wound while she kept Tom distracted with questions about his horse. Dale watched in amazement, seeing how she combined efficiency with genuine care. When she finished, Tom's arm was properly bandaged, and the boy himself was wrapped in a blanket by the fire, sipping hot coffee sweetened with the last of Dale's sugar. You've got healing hands, Miss Amanda, Tom said drowsily. Just like Aunt Sarah used to. Dale's sharp intake of breath drew Amanda's attention. His face had gone still, like a man touching an old wound. Quietly, she moved to wash the bloody cloths, giving him space with his memories. The short winter day was already fading when Dale finally spoke again. Sarah, my wife, she helped raise Tom after his parents passed, had a way of making hurts better, like you do. He stared into the fire. Been 5 years since the fever took her, but sometimes the missing feels fresh as yesterday, Amanda finished softly. Grief's got its own time. Dale nodded, grateful she understood. Outside, unnoticed by those within, 2 riders passed slowly by the cabin. The rejected rancher and the banker spoke in low voices, their faces hard with malice as they observed the smoke rising from Dale's chimney. Inside, Tom had drifted to sleep, his young face peaceful in the firelight. Amanda began to sing softly, an old hymn her mother had loved, Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Her clear voice filled the cabin with gentle comfort. Dale closed his eyes, letting the familiar words wash over him. When Amanda finished, the silence felt somehow softer than before. Thank you, Dale said simply, for all of it, the care you showed him, the song. Been too long since this place heard a woman's voice raised in praise. Amanda smoothed Tom's blanket, her touch maternal. He's a good boy. You've raised him well. He's had it hard. We both have. Dale's voice roughened. But maybe he didn't finish the thought. But his eyes, when they met Amanda's, held something like hope. Outside, the winter stars emerged, bright and steady above the snowy landscape, while inside the cabin 3 lonely souls found themselves a little less alone, 2 days of snowbound. Quiet had settled into an easy rhythm at the cabin. When the weather finally broke, revealing a pale blue sky, Dale announced they needed supplies from town. Amanda nodded, knowing they couldn't avoid people forever, though her stomach nodded at the thought. The wagon wheels crunched through fresh snow as they made their way down the mountain trail. Amanda sat straight-backed beside Dale, her hands folded in her lap. The morning air bit sharp and clean, carrying the scent of pine. Ain't much of a town, Dale said as they approached the first buildings. But folks generally mind their own business. Amanda smoothed her skirts. I've weathered worse than whispers, Mr. Barringer. The wagon pulled up in front of Jensen's general store. Dale helped Amanda down, his large hand steady beneath her elbow. A cluster of women on the boardwalk fell silent as they passed, their eyes following Amanda's progress. Inside, the store smelled of coffee beans, leather, and tobacco. Mr. Jensen, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, nodded cautiously at Dale, but avoided looking directly at Amanda. She pretended not to notice, moving purposefully through the aisles with her list. "Flour," she murmured, reaching for a sack. "And salt. The coffee's nearly gone, too." Dale followed, carrying the heavier items. Other customers browsed nearby, their conversations suspiciously muted. Amanda could feel their stares like pinpricks on her skin, but she kept her movements graceful and unhurried. At the counter, Mr. Canfield's shadow fell across their purchases. The banker had been examining ledgers, but now he straightened. His lip curling. "Barringer," he said, voice carrying. "Interesting choice of housekeeper you've taken on." Dale's shoulders tensed, but Amanda spoke first, her tone courteous and clear. "Good morning, Mr. Canfield. I trust you're well." The banker blinked, wrong-footed by her refined manner. Before he could respond, she turned to Mr. Jensen. "Would you add a bolt of that blue calico, please? It's perfect for making curtains." Her calm dignity made Canfield's sneering seem crude by comparison. The banker's face darkened, but he could find no opening for further insult in the face of her composure. As Mr. Jensen tallied their purchases, a woman hurried into the store, 3 small children trailing behind her. Mrs. Peterson, Amanda remembered, hearing someone call her. The woman's youngest clung to her skirts, face flushed and eyes glassy. Mrs. Peterson hesitated, glancing between Amanda and the other watching townspeople. Desperation won out. "I heard you helped young Tom Barringer. My little ones, the fever won't break. I've tried everything I know." Amanda's expression softened. "Course, I'll come tomorrow if you'll tell me where the yellow house." Past the church, Mrs. Peterson rushed out. "Thank you. Thank you." Dale finished loading their supplies, and they climbed back into the wagon. Amanda could feel the weight of the town's eyes on her back, but she kept her head high. They were well outside town before she let her shoulders drop. Dale glanced over, noting the subtle change. "You handled them well," he said quietly. Amanda's hands twisted in her lap. "Practice," she whispered. The word held volumes of pain. They traveled another mile before she spoke again, her voice distant. "I taught at a church school in New Orleans. After the war, when they finally allowed education for freed children, such hungry minds they had, so eager to learn." Dale kept silent, letting her find the words. "We had so little, just a room in the church basement, some donated books. But those children, they'd walk miles to learn their letters. Some came straight from the fields, still covered in dirt. Didn't matter. They wanted better for their babies than they'd had." The wagon wheels creaked steadily as Amanda stared at the snowy landscape. Then the mobs came. "Said we were getting above ourselves, teaching ideas that would cause trouble." Her voice cracked. "They waited until night, when the children were gone. But Reverend Matthews was there, checking on things. And Mary, sweet Mary, who helped clean." Dale's hands tightened on the reins as Amanda's words faltered. "I saw the smoke from my boarding house window." By the time I reached the church, she drew a shuddering breath. "The screams, dear God, the screams. They wouldn't let anyone near with water, just watched it burn. Reverend Matthews and Mary, we found them after." Dale's quiet voice broke the heavy silence. "War makes monsters of men. Seen it myself at Shiloh. Sound of cannon fire still wakes me sometimes." Amanda wiped her eyes. "Does the pain ever ease?" "Some," Dale admitted. "But it changes you, makes you see clearer what matters." They reached the cabin as dusk was falling. Dale tended the horses while Amanda started supper. each moving in their own clouds of memory. Later, as lamplight cast warm shadows on the walls, Dale disappeared into the lean-to. He returned, carrying something wrapped in soft cloth. "Been meaning to give you this," he said gruffly. Holding out the package, Amanda unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small leather Bible, well-worn but lovingly preserved. The inside cover bore flowing script. "To Sarah, my beloved wife." "Dale, I couldn't." "Sarah would have wanted someone to use it," he interrupted. "Someone who understands its worth." Amanda traced the gold-leafed edges reverently. "Thank you," she whispered. The simple words carrying the weight of all they'd shared that day. Dale nodded once and moved to bank the fire. No more words were needed. Their shared grief had built a bridge between them, stronger than the prejudices, trying to tear them apart. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Amanda packed her mother's herbal remedies and clean cloths while Dale hitched the wagon. Her fingers traced the worn leather of the medical baga, reminder of skills learned at her mother's side. Long before the war changed everything. "Ready?" Dale asked, helping her up to the wagon seat. Amanda nodded, clutching the bag close. "Those children need help. Every hour counts with fever." They rode into town as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the fresh snow. The yellow house past the church looked small and tired, smoke curling weakly from its chimney. Mrs. Peterson met them at the door, dark circles beneath her eyes, telling of a sleepless night. "Thank the Lord you've come," she whispered, ushering them inside. "Tommy's worse, and now little Sarah's burning up too." The front room held 3 small pallets near the wood stove. 2 children tossed restlessly, their faces flushed with fever. The youngest sat quietly in a corner, watching with glassy eyes. Amanda moved swiftly, setting down her bag and removing her coat. "I'll need clean water, lots of it, and fresh cloths if you have them." "I'll fetch water," Dale said, already heading for the door. Amanda knelt beside Tommy's pallet, laying a gentle hand on his forehead. The heat radiating from his skin made her frown. How long has the fever been this high? 3 days now. Mrs. Peterson wrung her hands. Started with just sniffles, then Mama. Sarah's weak voice interrupted. "My throat hurts something awful." "I know, sweetheart." Amanda smoothed the girl's damp hair back. "We're going to help you feel better." She turned to Mrs. Peterson. "Do you have any willow bark or elderberry?" The woman shook her head helplessly. "I brought some." Amanda opened her bag, pulling out carefully wrapped packets. "We'll start with willow bark tea for the fever, then elderberry to fight the sickness." She looked up at Mrs. Peterson. "I'll need your biggest pot for boiling water." The morning passed in a blur of activity. Dale hauled bucket after bucket of water, splitting wood between trips to keep the stove burning hot. Amanda moved between the children, brewing herbs, changing compresses, and coaxing sips of tea past parched lips. Around noon, the sheriff's boots clomped onto the porch. He stepped inside, removing his hat. Heard there was sickness here. Came to see if help was needed. Amanda barely glanced up from where she bathed Tommy's face with cool cloths. "Sheriff Willard, if you're willing, we could use more firewood." The sheriff watched her work for a long moment, noting her sure movements and gentle touch. Without a word, he joined Dale at the woodpile. The afternoon stretched into evening. Amanda refused to leave while the fever still raged, though Dale brought her food and insisted she eat. As darkness fell, Tommy's fever finally broke. Sarah's followed a few hours later. By midnight, both children slept peacefully, their breathing easy and regular. Mrs. Peterson clutched Amanda's hand, tears streaming down her face. "How can I ever thank you? We couldn't afford a doctor, and I was so scared there's no need," Amanda said softly. "Your children are healing. That's thanks enough." Dale appeared at her elbow. "Time to get you home. You're dead on your feet." Amanda nodded. Gathering her supplies with weary hands, Mrs. Peterson hugged her fiercely before they left. The streets were empty as they drove home. But Amanda noticed changes the next morning when they returned to check on the children. Men who had previously turned away now touched their hats as she passed. Women who had whispered behind their hands offered small smiles. Even Mr. Jensen at the store greeted her directly when they stopped for more supplies. Word travels fast. In a small town, Dale commented as they loaded the wagon. "So does kindness," Amanda replied. "Sometimes it just needs a chance to grow." They were nearly home when Dale cleared his throat. "Been thinking." Amanda waited, sensing his struggle for words. "Ranch needs tending. Proper tending, like it had when Sarah was alive. Not just patches and making do." He glanced at her, then back at the road. "You've got a way about you. With people. With making a place feel like home." Amanda's heart quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "Are you asking me something, Mr. Barringer?" "Reckon I am." Dale's hands tightened on the reins. "Would you consider staying on?" Not just as help, but as he broke off, the words catching. "Well, as more than that, in time." Amanda's breath caught in her throat. She studied his profile, seeing the hope and fear warring in his expression. "That's not a small thing you're asking." "No," Dale agreed quietly. The wagon wheels creaked through the snow as Amanda gathered her thoughts. "I'd need time, to be sure." Dale nodded, relief evident in the loosening of his shoulders. "Time I can give." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, each lost in private thoughts. Neither noticed the dark figure of Canfield watching from the shadows of the bank as they passed through town. His face twisted with calculation. The banker stood at his window long after they'd gone, finger-tapping. Against his ledger, the town's changing attitude toward Amanda threatened everything he'd built. If people started accepting her kind as equals, what other changes might follow? His carefully maintained system of favors and fears could crumble. "This won't do at all," he muttered, already plotting. "Won't do at all." But up at the ranch, such schemes seemed distant. Amanda stood at the cabin door, watching the sunset paint the snow in shades of rose and gold. Dale's words echoed in her mind, full of possibility. Her heart yearned to say yes immediately, but experience had taught her caution. She would take the time he offered. Let this fragile thing between them grow naturally. She touched the small Bible Dale had given her, drawing comfort from its worn leather cover. For the first time since the school burning, she felt hope taking root, tender as a spring shoot, but growing stronger each day. The following Sunday dawned bright and clear, with fresh snow blanketing the ground like a clean white tablecloth. Amanda stood before the small mirror in Dale's cabin, adjusting her best bonnet, the one she'd managed to protect during her journey west. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tied the ribbon under her chin. Dale waited outside with the wagon, dressed in his finest clothes, his boots polished to a shine. When Amanda emerged, he offered his hand to help her up to the seat, treating her with the same gentle courtesy he'd shown since that first day at the train station. "Ready?" he asked softly. Amanda nodded, smoothing her skirts. "As ready as I'll ever be." The wagon wheels crunched through the snow as they made their way to town. Amanda's heart quickened as the white church steeple came into view, its bell already tolling across the valley. Other wagons and riders converged on the building, families dressed in their Sunday best as Dale helped Amanda down from the wagon. She noticed the subtle changes in how people greeted them. Mrs. Peterson hurried over with her children, all three now healthy and bright-eyed. "Miss Amanda," little Sarah called out, running to hug her around the waist. "Mama says you're coming to Sunday dinner next week." Several other townspeople nodded or touched their hats as Amanda and Dale climbed to the church steps. Even those who still frowned or whispered seemed less bold about it now. Inside, the wood stove had the church pleasantly warm, and sunlight streamed through frosted windows, casting rainbow patterns on the wooden pews. They found seats near the middle, and Amanda felt Dale's steady presence beside her as a comfort. Preacher Collins stood at the pulpit, arranging his Bible and notes. The congregation settled as the organ wheezed to life, and the first hymn was announced. "Amazing Grace," the preacher called out. "All rise and join in praise." Amanda stood with the others, her worn hymnal open in her hands. As the organ played the opening notes, she began to sing, her voice rising clear and true above. The congregation. Years of leading songs at her mother's church had trained her well, and the familiar words flowed from her heart. Several heads turned at the sound of her voice. Dale glanced sideways, a look of wonder crossing his face. By the second verse, other voices had fallen silent, letting Amanda's rich tones fill the church. When the final amen faded, there was a moment of profound silence before the congregation sat. The service proceeded as normal, but Amanda could feel something had shifted. After the final prayer, as people began to file out, Dale touched her arm. "Wait here a moment," he whispered, then strode purposefully toward Preacher Collins, who was gathering his papers. Amanda watched, her heart suddenly racing, as Dale spoke quietly with the preacher. Collins looked surprised, then thoughtful, nodding slowly. Dale returned to Amanda's side, taking her hand. "Miss Amanda," he said, his voice carrying in the now quiet church. Those remaining turned to watch. "I know we ain't known each other long, but sometimes the Lord's blessings come swift and sure." He paused, drawing a deep breath. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Right here in this church, before God and these people." Gasps filled the air. Amanda felt tears welling in her eyes as she looked up at Dale's earnest face. In it, she saw everything she dreamed of but never dared hope for: respect, acceptance, and love growing stronger each day. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, I will." Dale's face transformed with joy, his usual stoic expression breaking into a broad smile that seemed to take years off his weathered features. Several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes, and Preacher Collins stepped forward, beaming. "Well, then," the preacher said, "shall we set a date?" They agreed on 2 weeks hence, giving time for preparations, but not so long that winter storms might interfere. As they left the church, congratulations followed them down the steps. Even some who had been coldest before offered cautious good wishes. That evening, Amanda sat by lamplight in the cabin, carefully stitching at the white muslin she'd bought from Mr. Jensen's store. Dale had insisted on paying for the finest fabric available, though Amanda kept her design simple and elegant. Her needle flashed in the golden light as she worked, her thoughts drifting to how much her life had changed since that bitter morning at the train station. Dale appeared in the doorway, watching her work. He'd been smiling more than she'd ever seen, his joy impossible to contain. "Need anything?" he asked softly. Amanda looked up, returning his smile. "Just time to finish this properly." She held up the partially completed bodice. "My mama always said a wedding dress carries prayers in every stitch." Dale nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'll leave you to it then." He paused. "Amanda, thank you for saying yes." "Thank you for asking," she replied simply. After Dale left to check the animals one last time, Amanda continued working, her needle weaving hope into every seam. From ashes, she thought, remembering the burned schoolhouse in New Orleans. From ashes to this new life, this second chance at happiness. Across town in his darkened office, Mr. Canfield sat at his desk, penning a telegram by lamplight. His face was set in hard lines as he wrote, "Need documents immediately. Stop marriage must be prevented. Stop send proof of prior engagement. Stop will pay. Whatever necessary stop he, read it over. Then walk through the cold night to the telegraph office. The operator had already closed up, but Canfield had a keybot with strategic loans and favors. The telegraph clicked and clattered in the darkness, sending his message racing along the wires. But up at the parsonage, such schemes seemed far away. Amanda stood before another mirror, this one in the preacher's wife's sewing room. As the kind woman helped her with the final fitting of her dress, snow fell softly outside the window, each flake catching the lamplight like a tiny star. "There, now," Mrs. Collins said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "You make a lovely bride." Amanda smoothed the simple white muslin, marveling at how right it felt. The dress was plain but beautifully made, with tiny pleats at the waist and delicate stitching at the collar. Like her new life with Dale, it was honest and true, without pretense or artifice. "Thank you," Amanda whispered, turning to see how the skirt moved. "For everything, eh?" Mrs. Collins patted her hand. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, dear. Sometimes the longest road leads us right where we need to be." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in fresh white possibility. The January morning dawned crisp and bright, sunlight glinting off fresh snow like scattered diamonds. Inside the cabin, Amanda stood before the small mirror, adjusting the lace collar of her wedding dress. Her fingers trembled slightly as she smoothed the white muslin, checking each careful stitch one final time. Through the window, she heard Dale readying the wagon, his boots crunching in the packed snow. He had risen before dawn to ensure everything would be perfect, the horses groomed until their coats gleamed, the wagon bed filled with fresh hay and warm blankets. Amanda touched the simple gold cross at her throat, her mother's, the only piece of jewelry she owned. Her reflection showed a woman transformed by hope, eyes bright with promise despite the nerves fluttering in her stomach. The dress, though modest, made her feel like a proper bride. A gentle knock sounded at the door. "Ready?" Dale called softly. "Just a moment," Amanda replied, settling her best shawl around her shoulders. She took one last look in the mirror, whispered a quick prayer, and opened the door. Dale stood there in his Sunday best, hat in hand. His eyes widened at the sight of her, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Finally, he managed, "You look beautiful." Amanda felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she murmured. "You look quite handsome yourself." He helped her into the wagon with careful hands, tucking the blankets around her to ward off the morning chill. The horse's breath steamed in the cold, ere as Dale clicked them into motion, hooves squeaking against the snow. They rode in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Amanda watched the familiar landscape pass, remembering that first frightening ride from town just weeks ago. How much had changed since then? The same road that had once led her to uncertainty now carried her toward joy. As they approached town, Amanda's stomach tightened with nerves. Already she could see people heading toward the white church, their Sunday best bright against the snow. Some walked in family groups, others rode in wagons or on horseback. "Quite a turnout," Dale commented, quietly. Indeed, it seemed most of the town had come, whether from support or curiosity. Amanda spotted Mrs. Peterson and her children, now healthy thanks to her care during their fever. The sheriff stood near the church steps, speaking with several ranchers. Even Mr. Jensen had closed his store to attend. Dale helped Amanda down from the wagon, keeping her dress clear of the muddy snow. As they approached the church steps, people turned to watch. Amanda heard whispers, some kind, some less so, but held her head high. Dale's solid presence beside her gave her strength. Inside, the church glowed with morning light streaming through frost-edged windows. Brass candlesticks gleamed on the altar, and someone had placed evergreen boughs along the pews. The sight brought tears to Amanda's eyes. It was more beautiful than she had imagined. Preacher Collins stood ready at the altar, Bible in hand, his wife beaming from the front pew. The congregation settled into place as Dale and Amanda moved to stand. Before him, Amanda's heart thundered in her chest as Dale took her hand in his warm grip. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God." Amanda barely heard the familiar words, lost in the moment's significance. Dale's hand tightened gently around hers as they faced each other. His eyes held such warmth and certainty that her nervousness began to fade. But just as Preacher Collins asked if any new reason why they should not be joined, the heavy church door burst open with a bang. Cold air rushed in as Mr. Canfield strode down the aisle, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. In his hand, he held a folded paper. "I have reason," he announced loudly, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. "This woman is already married." Gasps erupted through the congregation. Amanda felt the blood drain from her face as Canfield approached the altar, holding out what appeared to be an official document. "I have here a notarized marriage certificate from New Orleans," he declared, satisfaction clear in his tone. "This woman has a living husband there. She cannot legally marry again." "That's impossible," Amanda stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. She swayed slightly, grateful for Dale's steadying grip on her arm. "I've never been married before, never." Dale's face had darkened with fury. "Show me that paper," he demanded, stepping forward. Canfield smiled coldly, holding the document just out of reach. "This is a legal matter now." "Sheriff." He turned to where Sheriff Willard stood near the back of the church. "I believe you should examine this evidence." The sheriff made his way forward, face grave as he took the paper. The congregation buzzed with whispers as he studied it carefully, holding it up to the light from the windows. "It appears to be properly notarized," he said slowly. "A T. But I'll need time to verify its authenticity." Preacher Collins cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, but with this accusation raised, I cannot proceed with the ceremony until this matter is resolved." Amanda felt her world crumbling around her. "Please," she begged, turning to Dale. "You must believe me. It's not true." Dale's jaw was clenched tight, his eyes blazing as he glared at Canfield. But before he could speak, the whispers from the congregation grew louder, more accusatory. Amanda heard fragments that cut like knives. Deceiver, liar, knew she. Couldn't be trusted. The shame and horror overwhelmed her. Gathering her skirts, Amanda fled down the aisle and out into the bitter morning air. Tears blinded her as she ran through the snow, her white dress trailing behind her like broken dreams. She heard Dale calling her name, but couldn't stop. Couldn't face the judgment in all those eyes. She reached the wagon and collapsed against it, sobs racking her body. Moments later, Dale's strong hands were there, helping her up into the seat. He said nothing as he climbed up beside her, but his movements were tight with barely contained rage as he took up the reins. The wagon lurched into motion, leaving the crowd still spilling from the church behind them. Amanda wept silently as they drove, her tears freezing on her cheeks. Dale stared straight ahead, his silence speaking volumes of his helplessness and fury. The simple white dress, sewn with such hope and care, was now spotted with snow and mud, like her dreams of happiness soiled by cruel lies. The steady clip-clop of hooves marked their journey home, each step taking them further from the joy they'd almost grasped as they passed beneath the bare winter trees. Amanda had never felt more alone. Even with Dale beside her, shame and doubt created a wall between them. Her tears finally spent, She stared numbly at the passing landscape, wondering how such a bright morning had turned so dark. Dale handled the reins with tight control, his knuckles white with tension. The wagon rolled onward through the snow, carrying its burden of broken hopes toward home in heavy silence. The evening shadows crept across the cabin floor as Amanda sat before the fire, her once pristine wedding dress now wrinkled and stained with snow. The flames danced before her unseeing eyes, their warmth unable to touch the cold despair in her heart. Her fingers traced the muddy hem of her ruined dress, each touch a reminder of her shattered dreams. "I have to leave," she whispered, her voice barely carrying above the crack and pop of burning wood. "There's no other way." Dale stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense. "No," he said firmly. "Running won't solve anything." Amanda rose shakily, smoothing her crumpled skirts with trembling hands. "You don't understand. Every day I stay here damages your reputation more." She moved to gather her few belongings, pulling her carpetbag from beneath the bed. "I won't be the reason people turn against you." "Let them talk," Dale growled, but Amanda could hear the strain in his voice. She began folding her clothes with mechanical precision, each movement deliberate and final. "First New Orleans, now here. Everything I touch turns to ashes." Her voice cracked. "I must be cursed." Dale watched her pack, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. Without a word, he suddenly strode to the door, yanking it open. Cold air rushed in as he disappeared into the snowy darkness, leaving Amanda alone with her grief. Outside, Dale's boots crunched through the crusted snow as he paced, his breath coming in angry clouds. His voice rose rough and desperate to the star-filled sky. "Lord, give me strength," he pleaded, stopping to lean against the barn door. "Show me how to fight these lies, how to keep her here." His words hung in the frozen air as snow began to fall again, soft and silent. Miles away in town, the saloon buzzed with activity. Canfield held court at the bar, his satisfaction evident as he nursed his whiskey. "You should have seen her run," he sneered to his eager audience. "Like a guilty woman always does." The crowd pressed closer, some nodding in agreement. "Can't trust her kind," one man muttered. "Never could." "Maybe we ought to help her leave town," another suggested darkly. "Make sure she understands she ain't welcome." Canfield smiled behind his glass, watching his words take root. The angry murmurs grew louder, fueled by whiskey and prejudice. Back at the cabin, Dale returned with purpose in his stride. Snow dusted his shoulders as he stepped inside, his face set with newfound determination. Amanda stood by her packed bag, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders. "I won't let lies decide our fate," Dale declared, crossing the room too. "Stand before her." His voice was quiet but firm, brooking no argument. "Not yours, not mine." Amanda's hands twisted in her shawl. "But the certificate is false," Dale cut in. "Has to be. And I aim to prove it." "How can you be so sure?" Amanda's voice trembled. "What if because I know you?" Dale said simply. He reached out and took her cold hands in his warm ones. "And because God didn't bring you to me just to have it end like this?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I feel so cursed," she whispered. "Everywhere I go, trouble follows." Those children. In New Orleans, now this. A sob caught in her throat. "I can't bear to bring more pain to those I care about." Dale's grip tightened on her hands. "Listen to me," he said, his voice gentle but fierce. "You're not cursed. You're blessed with strength and courage I've rarely seen. And I vow to you, right here and now, I will uncover the truth." A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks. Up the chimney, Amanda looked up into Dale's steady gaze, wanting desperately to believe him. "How?" "First light tomorrow, I'm riding to confront Canfield's source," Dale said. That paper didn't appear from nowhere. Someone sent it, and I aim to find out who. Amanda pulled one hand free to dash away tears. It's dangerous. Canfield has influence. Connections? So do I. Dale's jaw set stubbornly. And mine are honest folk who believe in truth. Amanda turned away, moving to the window. Outside, the snow fell steadily, blanketing the world in white silence. I should still go, she murmured. At least until no. Dale's voice was final. He crossed to stand behind her, his presence solid and reassuring. I'm asking you to trust me, to stay and fight this together. Amanda's reflection wavered in, the dark glass overlaid with falling snow. She looked small and uncertain, but something in Dale's words kindled a spark of hope in her chest. Slowly, she nodded. I'll stay, she whispered, and I'll pray for deliverance from these lies. Dale's relief was almost palpable. He squeezed her shoulder gently before moving to the door. I need to check the stock and prepare for tomorrow's ride. Try to rest. Left? Alone, Amanda sank to her knees beside the bed. Her hands clasped tightly as she began to pray, her whispered words urgent and fearful. Lord, please, if you ever heard me, hear me now. Show us the way through this darkness. The fire crackled softly as she prayed, its warm light pushing back the shadows. Outside, Dale's boots crunched through the snow as he made his way to the barn, his mind already planning tomorrow's confrontation. The night deepened around the lonely cabin, while inside, two hearts beat with fear and determination. One sought escape from a lifetime of pain, while the other prepared to fight for the truth that could save them both. The pale winter sun had barely cleared the eastern mountains when Dale mounted his horse, his breath clouded in the frigid morning air as he adjusted his hat and checked his gun belt. Amanda stood in the cabin doorway, her shawl pulled tight against the dawn chill. Be careful, she called softly. Canfield won't take kindly to being challenged. Dale nodded, his expression grim. Truth's got a way of coming to light no matter how folks try to bury it. He clicked to his horse, and soon the sound of hoofbeats faded into the morning stillness. The town was just coming alive when Dale reined up in front of the bank. Shop owners swept their walkways, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakery. Dale's spurs jingled as he strode through the bank's heavy doors, finding Canfield already at his desk, counting stacks of bills. Well, if it isn't the fool who nearly married a Canfield, began with a smirk. Where did you get those papers? Tail cut him off, his voice low but carrying the weight of thunder. Canfield leaned back, affecting an air of bored superiority. Official documents from New Orleans, properly notarized. Perhaps you should ask your would-be bride about her past marriages. Dale's hands flexed at his sides. You're lying, Canfield? Can I aim to prove it? See that fellow at the saloon. Canfield gestured through the window at a scruffy man slouching against the hitching post. He witnessed her first wedding himself. Quite the ceremony, he tells me. Dale turned without another word, his boots echoing on the wooden sidewalk as he crossed to the saloon.
Oh.
The drifter straightened up, catching the look in Dale's eyes. He darted inside, but Dale followed, letting the batwing doors slam behind him. The morning quiet of the saloon broke as Dale cornered the man against the bar. Tell me about this wedding you claim to have seen. The drifter's eyes darted between Dale and the door. It was real fine. White dress and everything. When Dale demanded, Last spring. Where exactly? St. Mary's Church, and there ain't no St. Mary's in New Orleans, Dale growled. Try again. The man's nerve broke under Dale's steady glare. All right. He slumped against the bar. Canfield paid me $50 to back up his story, said all I had to do was nod and agree. Dale grabbed the man's collar. You're coming with me to see the sheriff. Meanwhile, Back at the ranch, Amanda jumped at the sound of approaching wagons. Through the window, she saw several townspeople, including some who had been at the failed wedding. Her heart pounded, but she squared her shoulders and opened the door before they could knock. "Get out, woman," one man called. "We don't want your kind here." Amanda stepped onto the porch, her voice steady despite her fear. "Would you like to come in for some tea? It's awfully cold out here." Her calm response caught them off guard. After a moment's hesitation, Mrs. Peterson, the mother whose children Amanda had nursed through fever, stepped forward. "I reckon we could talk a spell." Soon, Amanda had several townsfolk seated around Dale's rough table, steam rising from tin cups. She moved with quiet grace, serving them before taking her own seat. "I know you have questions," she began, "and you deserve answers. I came here seeking a fresh start after losing everything in New Orleans. I taught at a school for freed children until," she paused, steadying her voice, "until it was burned by those who hated what we were doing." Mrs. Peterson touched her arm gently. "Like you helped my young ones." Amanda nodded. "Teaching and healing, that's all I've ever wanted to do, to make a difference where I could. But that marriage certificate someone started is false," Amanda said firmly. "Never been married. I came here hoping to find a good man and a place to belong. Instead, I found Dale." Her voice softened. "And despite everything, I thank God for that every day." The afternoon sun slanted through the windows as they talked. Some remained suspicious, but others, remembering Amanda's gentle care of their sick and her clear voice raised in Sunday hymns, began to soften. The shadows were lengthening when they heard horses approaching. Dale rode up with the sheriff and the drifter, who now wore iron cuffs. The townspeople filed out to hear what had happened. "This man has confessed," Sheriff Willard announced, "to accepting a bribe from Mr. Canfield to bear false witness. The marriage certificate was forged, meant to prevent a union that certain parties," he glanced meaningfully toward the bank, "found threatening to their interests." Amanda swayed slightly, and Dale was instantly at her side, supporting her with a strong arm. "It's over," he murmured. "The truth's out now." She leaned against him, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I never lost faith," she whispered. "But I was so afraid. No more fear," Dale said firmly, pulling her closer. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." The townsfolk began to disperse, many stopping to offer awkward apologies or words of support. Mrs. Peterson hugged Amanda tightly before leaving. "You come by tomorrow," she insisted. "My girls have been asking for you." As the last wagon rolled away, Dale and Amanda stood on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The truth had been revealed, and though challenges might lie ahead, they would meet them standing side by side, their bond stronger for having been tested by fire. "Thank you for fighting for me," Amanda said softly. Dale's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Always will," he promised. "We're in this together now." The evening star appeared in the darkening sky as they turned to go inside, leaving the day's trials behind them. Their cabin glowed with warmth and welcome, a beacon of hope in the gathering dusk. The church hall buzzed with tension as townsfolk filed in, their boots scraping against wooden floorboards. Late afternoon sun filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across worried faces. Sheriff Willard stood at the front, his badge catching the light as the drifter, still in irons, shuffled beside him. "Folks," the sheriff called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We're here to set things straight about what happened at the wedding." He gestured to the drifter. "This man has something to tell you all." The drifter twisted his hat in his hands, unable to meet the crowd's expectant stares. "Mr. Canfield," he began, his voice cracking, "paid me $50 to lie about witnessing a wedding in New Orleans." He swallowed hard. There weren't no wedding I ain't never even been to New Orleans." Gasps rippled through the gathering. Mrs. Peterson clutched her shawl, eyes wide with shock. The blacksmith's wife pressed her hand to her mouth. From his place near the back, Canfield's face reddened. "That's a lie," Canfield shouted, pushing forward through the crowd. "This man came to me with information." "No, sir," Dale's deep voice. Carried across the hall as he rose from his seat, Amanda sat quietly beside him, her hands folded in her lap. "You sought him out, just like you sought to destroy an innocent woman's reputation." Dale moved to the front, his tall frame commanding. "Attention. While you were plotting your schemes, Amanda was nursing sick children back to health." He turned to face the townspeople. "Remember when fever struck the Peterson family? Amanda stayed up 3 nights straight, cooling those children's brows." Mrs. Peterson stood, tears in her eyes. "That's the gospel truth. My little Sarah wouldn't be here if not for her care." More voices joined in, recounting times Amanda had helped, taught, or shown kindness. The sheriff raised his hand for quiet. "Mr. Canfield," he said gravely, "you're guilty of fraud. You forged official documents and bribed a man to bear false witness. That's serious business." The banker's usual swagger crumbled. "You can't prove we have the telegram receipts," the sheriff cut in. "And your man here has written out a full confession." The crowd erupted in angry shouts. "Lock him up!" Someone called, "Make him pay." Amanda rose slowly, her simple dress rustling as she moved to the front. The hall fell silent, watching. She stood before Canfield, who wouldn't meet her eyes. "Canfield," she said, her voice clear and steady. "What you did was wrong. You tried to destroy not just my happiness, but Dale's too." She paused, drawing a deep breath. "But I forgive you." The words fell like stones in still water. Canfield's head snapped up, disbelief written across his face. The townsfolk stared, stunned by her grace. "I forgive you," Amanda repeated softly. "Because holding on to bitterness only hurts the one carrying it." Dale's chest swelled with pride as he watched her. Even the sheriff removed his hat in respect. Preacher Collins stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Miss Amanda, Mr. Barringer," he said, looking between them. "After all this, do you still wish to be joined in holy matrimony?" Amanda turned to Dale, tears shining in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "more than ever." A cheer went up from the crowd, led by Tom whooping from his place near the front. Mrs. Peterson embraced Amanda, while other women rushed forward to offer congratulations. The men clapped Dale on the back, even the sheriff allowing himself a rare smile. The sun was setting as Dale helped Amanda into the wagon for the ride home. Tom rode ahead on his pony, eager to tell the horses all about the day's excitement. The evening air carried the first hint of spring, though patches of snow still lingered in shadowed hollows. Amanda leaned against Dale's shoulder as they traveled the familiar road. "I feel like I can finally breathe again," she said. "You showed more grace than most would," Dale replied, his voice rough with emotion. "When you forgave him like that," he shook his head in wonder. "It's what needed doing," Amanda said simply. "Hate's a heavy burden to carry." When they reached the ranch, Tom was already spreading fresh hay in the barn. Amanda went to help him, her movements slow with exhaustion but her spirit light. Dale watched from the doorway as she tucked the boy into his loft bed, smoothing his wild hair. "God restores what men try to destroy," she whispered, pressing a kiss to Tom's forehead. The boy smiled sleepily, already half dreaming. Dale's heart swelled as Amanda descended the ladder. Here was his family, given back to him when he'd thought such joy impossible. Tomorrow would bring wedding preparations and new beginnings, but tonight was for quiet Thanksgiving and peace. Hard-1, the lamp's glow spilled warm and golden across the cabin floor as they settled in for the evening. their shadows merging on the rough-hewn walls. Outside, an owl cawed softly to the rising moon, and all was right with their world at last. Spring crept onto the ranch like a gentle awakening. Fresh grass poked through melting snow as Amanda and Dale resumed their wedding preparations, this time with peaceful hearts. The cabin transformed day by day, Amanda's touch bringing warmth to Space's long, cold dot in the afternoons. She sat with Tom at the kitchen table, Dale's wife's old Bible open between them. Her finger traced beneath the words as Tom sounded them. Out, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sound it slow, Amanda encouraged. For God so loved the world, Tom finished proudly, beaming up at her. Dale, watching from his chair by the fire, felt his throat tighten. His late wife had always wanted to teach the boy to read. They worked the ranch together, mending winter's damage. Amanda proved as capable with fence posts as she was with cooking. Pots, her sleeves rolled up as she helped Dale repair broken rails. Her laughter came easier now, brightening the air like birdsong. One evening, as golden light spilled across the yard, Dale found Amanda in the barn, struggling with a heavy saddle. Without warning, he lifted her clear off her feet, saddle and all. Her surprised laugh echoed off the rafters, a sound of pure joy that made his heart skip. "Dale Barringer," she exclaimed, still laughing as he set her down. "You're worse than Tom with your tricks." Dale's eyes crinkled with happiness. "Never thought I'd find joy again after Sarah passed," he admitted softly. "Figured that part of life was over for me." Amanda touched his cheek gently. God has his own timing. Throughout the week, townsfolk rode out to the ranch. Mrs. Peterson brought a fresh-baked pie and tears of apology. The blacksmith's wife offered a handmade quilt, shamefaced for her earlier doubts. Amanda received each visitor with grace, serving coffee and sharing stories until the past hurts dissolved like sugar in tea. When Sunday arrived, Little Church fairly burst with people. Wildflowers decorated every window, their sweet scent mixing with spring air through open doors. The congregation buzzed with excitement, a far cry from the tension of weeks before. Amanda stood at the back, clutching a bouquet of prairie flowers. Her dress was still simple muslin, but she wore it like a queen's gown. Tom appeared at her side, proud in his Sunday best. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm just as Dale had taught him. The church fell quiet as Amanda walked the aisle, head high, no fear shadowing her steps. Dale waited at the front, his eyes never leaving her face. When Tom placed her hand in Dale's, the boy's chest puffed with importance. Preacher Collins smiled broadly as he began the service. This time, no interruptions broke the sacred words. Dale's voice rang clear and strong through his vows. Amanda's answers came steady and sure, joy making her face luminous. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. As Dale drew Amanda into their first kiss as husband and wife, the church bells pealed joyously, their sound rolling across the prairie like waves of celebration. 3 weeks after their wedding, the Barringer Ranch bloomed with new purpose. Amanda transformed their front parlor into a makeshift classroom, pushing back furniture to make room for children who came eagerly each morning. 6 wooden slates lined the wall, and books precious as gold out here filled a corner shelf Dale had, built specially. "Remember now," Amanda's voice carried clearly as she guided tiny fingers across letters. "Sound it out slowly." White and colored children sat shoulder to shoulder on bench seats, their faces intent on the readers Dale had ordered from Denver. Tom sat among them, no longer the struggling reader, but now helping younger ones. Pride straightened his shoulders as he helped little Sarah Miller sound out difficult words. Amanda caught Dale watching from the doorway, his face soft with wonder at the sight. The Lord works in mysterious ways, he'd told her that morning, watching children arrive on foot and horseback from neighboring farms. Who'd have thought that train platform shame would lead to this? In town, word spread of Canfield's mounting. Troubles the banker who'd schemed to ruin their happiness now faced ruin himself. Debts he'd hidden for years surfaced like stones in spring plowing. One by one, he sold off prime parcels of land to settle accounts. Dale rode in early one morning to meet with Canfield at the bank. "I'll take the south pasture and creek bottom," he said firmly, laying out fair payment. "And the old Miller place, too." Canfield's face twitched, but he signed the deeds. Dale had bigger plans than just expanding his ranch. 3 freed families who'd been working as sharecroppers would soon have land of their own to work. "We'll build the schoolhouse here," Amanda declared that afternoon, pointing to a gentle rise near the creek. Dale nodded, already mentally marking timber they'd need. A proper school with real desks and a bell. That evening, neighbors gathered around the Behringers' long table, the Millers, the Washingtons, and the Hendersons. The cabin filled with the aroma of Amanda's cooking and the sound of easy laughter. Children played checkers by the fire, while adults discussed spring planting. After supper, Dale rose to his feet, glass raised. "The Lord works in ways we can't always see," he said, his deep voice carrying emotion. "When he sent me my perfect bride, he wasn't just blessing me. He was blessing this whole community through her." Amanda blinked back tears as she leaned against his strong shoulder. How far she'd come from that cold morning when she'd stood alone and rejected. Now warmth surrounded her, the warmth of home, family, and purpose. Under the soft glow of lamplight, Dale's arms circled her waist. Together, they watched their extended family, white and colored. Young and old, sharing stories and dreams in the cabin that love had transformed. God's grace, Amanda thought, could make beauty from ashes every time. Spring painted the Colorado hills in tender greens and wildflower gold. Outside the newly built schoolhouse, Amanda watched her students chase each other during their midday break, their laughter carrying across the fresh-turned fields. The simple wooden building stood proud against blue skies, a testament to how much had changed since that bitter winter morning at the train depot. Dale worked nearby, his steady hammer strikes echoing as he mended the corral fence. Every so often, he'd pause to watch Amanda guide a child back to play or settle a small dispute. Pride warmed his chest at how naturally she commanded respect with gentle firmness. Preacher Collins rode up on his dappled mare, dismounting with a smile that reached his eyes. "Mrs. Behringer," he said, touching his hat brim. "The Lord surely knew what he was doing when he brought you here." Amanda smoothed her apron. "Some might not have thought so at first." "That's precisely my point," the preacher said thoughtfully. "Your courage in facing down prejudice, it's opened eyes and changed hearts. Why, just yesterday Mrs. Miller told me she was wrong about everything." Dale set down his hammer and joined them, his hand finding Amanda's shoulder. The preacher nodded at them both. "You two have shown this town what real faith looks like." After the children had gone home and the preacher had ridden off, Dale led, his bay gelding from the barn already saddled. "Time for a ride, Mrs. Behringer." His eyes twinkled as he lifted Amanda easily into the saddle before mounting behind her. They rode across their expanded lands, past fields where freed families now worked their own soil. Amanda's laughter danced on the spring breeze as Dale guided them up to their favorite ridge. Below, the land stretched green and promising, so different from the barren acres he'd worked alone. "I never thought I'd find this," Amanda said softly, leaning back against his chest. "For so long I believed I was unwanted, cursed to bring trouble wherever I went." Dale's arms tightened around her. "You were always meant to be my perfect bride. The Lord just had to get me ready to see it." They sat together as the sun painted the western sky in rose and gold. Their silhouettes merged against the fading light. Here was redemption made real, love that had conquered prejudice, dignity that had outlasted shame, and faith that had finally found its reward. Thanks for watching. Stories like this shape us in ways we don't always expect. If something resonated, subscribe. I'm back tomorrow with another one worth hearing.